Hi everyone, welcome to the All Inclusive podcast, where each week I chat with industry experts and diversity, equity, and inclusion executives from the world's leading global brands who share their knowledge, experience, and actionable takeaways to help inclusive employers create cultures of belonging where everyone can thrive. Today, I've got the great pleasure of being joined by Joanne Conway. She is the head of diversity, equity, and inclusiveness at EY UK. Welcome, Joanne.
Thank you. Thank you, Natasha. Delighted to be here.
Oh no, I'm so thrilled to have you. So why not kick things off? Let's tell our listeners a little bit about you and your journey to where you are today.
Yeah, great. Happy to. So I've been with EY now for 16 years, so quite a long time. But within that, I've had a number of different careers. Started out actually back in Ireland, where I'm from, in the Dublin office. Started out as one of our more junior members of the team, so like a level one. Came in doing administrative work, so really working around working capital in finance actually. So my initial career with EY was in finance, so working as kind of like project manager, working with all of our accountants and our business professionals, helping them to manage their portfolios. So great experience in terms of influencing and just getting that baseline business acumen and professional services. Because for me, that was the first time that I'd ever actually worked in a professional services organization. So um, quite interesting and learnt a lot, and then managed to work my way up throughout that within finance, moving my way up to the point where I was then managing people and managing teams like me, and moved over to Manchester in after about 6 years of working at EY. I joined the Manchester office and there continued to work in finance, and at the end of my career within finance was heading up that whole finance team. So I was leading a team of about 60 people across the UK. So quite a really nice and interesting career journey up to that point. And then I'd always had an interest in people. I had done a degree with the Open University in psychology, and I started to look at what else I could do and what potential career path could I take at EY that would be more people focused. And that's when I started to look around and just see what other teams did. Actually, I didn't really know. I didn't even know what diversity, equity, and inclusiveness team was. And through just being curious, asking questions, getting to know people, I found out the work that they did, and then spent some time, probably about 2 or 3 years, really planning out what that would look like and how I would be able to transition from working in finance to DE&I. So that involved things like mentoring, work shadowing, taking on additional responsibilities, and bringing what the firm were trying to achieve to our finance team to be able to demonstrate that I had that skill in that space. So you often get asked, people are often interested in moving into to DE9. It's definitely possible, but it can be sometimes a longer journey than people expect. It isn't, even though I've moved from finance into DE9, I probably was working on that transition for about 3 or 4 years before it happened.
Mm. I mean, I think because DI is fairly, I want to say it's fairly new, but I think it's fairly new in terms of it's blown up more recently because of recent events. And so for you coming into to the work of DEI, what do you think is the purpose of diversity, equity, inclusion? Why is it important to have in an organization?
Yeah, it's so for EY, and I know, like you said, there's many organizations, and it's great to see the investment that's happening in this space at the moment, which is really important. But we've had a team for over 10 years now. So I've worked in the DEI space for 7 years, 3 years within our global team, and 4 years in the UK. Um, and really the purpose around that is having a dedicated team who have that expertise, that skill set, that knowledge, and the resilience to be able to bring an organization on a journey, which includes things like strategic thinking. It includes making business decisions, putting the people at the heart of those decisions, but also being able to articulate that this is an absolutely a business priority. So that's where I see that real value and the importance of having that dedicated team.
So what is the importance of kind of the data for diversity and inclusion? Like how can that help to really, as you said, you talked about it making sure that you're putting the people at the heart, but it's you still need to be able to tell the business, like at the top, how why it's really important in terms of the bottom line.
Yeah.
So we know that data can help to do that, but what's what does that look like? What is the
Mm.
data?
Yeah. And data underpins everything. And one of the things working in organizations is we'll often be asked around like, how is this, what's the evidence, we're really thinking about when you want to do something and putting forward a business case is making sure that it's evidence based, and numbers and metrics can help us do that, and it really focuses the minds. So I'll talk a little bit more around kind of it not being enough to just have numbers, but if we focus on the metrics for the moment, um, we've set clear targets, and we set those for our metrics, particularly around gender and ethnicity, because they're the numbers that we have enough data to actually be able to meaningfully measure. So we collect and we encourage all of our people to share their demographics in all areas of their identities, and we'll continue to look at that through an intersectional lens, but absolutely being able to show leaders where the gaps are, where they're making progress, and where the opportunities are for them to actually be able to do more is really, really important. And we do that through promotion, progression, recruitment, attrition, but also things like what we call utilization, which is chargeable work. So who's actually getting the best projects, who's getting that work, because we know that the type of work that you get means the access that you get to building relationships, to building a personal branding, to getting connection with bigger clients, and that then feeds into performance, progression, and how we see that representation at the top. So we look at that through a gender and ethnicity lens, and also we look at things like who's getting our performance awards, who's been recognized or who's been identified as an underperformer, and are there any gaps in that, particularly from gender and ethnicity. And that data allows us to start to unpeel some of that, because the more you know, the more you start to understand, and then you can overlay that with what are our people telling us, why is this happening, what do we need to change in our processes, what behaviors do we need to make sure that we're seeing, so that we can close any gaps and make sure that we have equitable outcomes for everybody. The
Mm.
data is really key part of that, but we can't just have the data. We've got to have the right behaviors that underpin that. People need to know why they're aiming for these targets and why it's important to have that representation, and then we bring together the right behaviors and understand what do we value and what do we reward as a firm.
In your experience, what's been the most challenging part of that? So when you're combining the data and the people, you find these gaps, you find where there's room for improvement. What challenges have you experienced in then taking, okay, now we know the problem, this is what we've got to do to solve it, but how do you get there?
Yeah, I think the it's having that clear framework and having that vision of where you want to get to. But the challenges are really around, actually there isn't a silver bullet. There's not one big thing that's going to change everything. Actually, it's the day-to-day behaviors that each of us make that really impact that data and that experience of our people. So that's the biggest challenge, is actually it isn't, you can't come in and say, oh, look, there's this shiny thing here, and if you just do this, then everything will be better. Actually, it's every decision that you make, every behavior that you have, how you treat people around you, what values you exhibit, what behaviors you encourage, and don't. All of that on a day-to-day, minute-to-minute basis matters. And that's the hardest part. So it's keeping that continuity, and often there can be a gap between people's intentions and the impact. So really, bringing that home to people, that actually it's each of us that owns this and can really influence the culture. And even when we're busy and even when we're stressed, really being able to think about having that human connection with people is really important.
So you're currently doing a doctorate on the topic of privilege. Um, can you? I'm really interested. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I'm studying with Cranfield University. I'm just in my I've finished my first year, um, and privilege to me is a really fascinating topic. So I acknowledge and recognize that I have privilege by being a white heterosexual woman. I acknowledge that. But what's fascinating to me is that complexity around actually how privilege is a social construct. So we can have privilege and lack privilege at the same time. So, for example, I grew up on free school meals. I didn't go to university. So therefore, I have lacked privilege in my life. But, like I've said, I absolutely have privilege right now through the role that I have, through the access that I get, and through the color of my skin, and through the fact that I'm heterosexual woman. So privilege describes those benefits that belong to people because they fit into specific social groups or have certain dimensions to their identity. And recognizing your privilege means understanding the access that you've been granted to certain spaces, the dynamics within an organization, and then how influential you can be in inclusion in the workplace. And that's really what I'm interested in, is actually if we start to unpick some of that and we take away that sometimes that misconception around if you have privilege, it means that you've done something wrong. Whereas actually, if you acknowledge that you have privilege and you can have privilege and have lacked privilege, then actually you can start to make decisions that are better. You can start to understand that how you walk through life is not the same as somebody else, and therefore our systems, our processes, our organizations are not necessarily set up in a way that's going to be equitable unless we actively dismantle what already exists.
Yeah. No, totally. I mean, I think there is a perception that when you're told, oh, well, you've got privilege, that it's a negative against you as a person. It means that you're a bad person, which that is not what privilege is at all. That's not what, if I was to say to you, well, you've got privilege, it's not
Mm,
me saying, well, you're a bad person, or that you're against me, or you don't want me to
yeah.
to succeed. It's just that you're sitting in a position where you're allowed, where you've got access to a lot more than
Hmm.
what I do, and it's going to be, the barriers for me are a lot higher than what you may well have experienced in getting to where you are today. um and once you know that, like you said, you can kind of start to see or to do action things slightly differently. And I think that it's great that that's something that you're interested in, and that you're researching and you're learning from, and then what your those teachings are then going to be able to carry through into the work that you're doing at EY. So I think that's great. I mean, for you, what are you most proud of from working within DEI?
Um, I mean, there's a couple of things. One, I guess, from in terms of the targets we've set ourselves, and in terms of being more representative at senior levels, because we know that matters. We know that representation matters. So we set ourselves a target in 2018 to double the representation of our partners group from 10% to 20% for ethnic minority, and from 20% to 40% by 2025. So we're still working towards that ambition, and it's a massive stretch. But at the moment, we have increased from 20% to 26% women, and from 10% to 15% ethnic minority. And I think that I'm really proud of, because that hasn't been easy. That has been that consistent. What are we doing? How are we making decisions? How are we making sure that we create a inclusive environment, that we retain our top talent, that we create these spaces, but we make decisions and we create that equity. The other thing I would say is the work we're doing on data. So when we look at our data on ethnicity, for example, we don't look at that as a homogenous group. We look at that within that, and that's allowed us to really get some insights that we didn't have before. So we now look at our our data in terms of mixed Black, Chinese, Asian, white, and actually where we had closed gaps in some of that between our white and ethnic minority groups, we were then able to see that there were still gaps between those communities, and that's allowed us to do deeper work and more meaningful change. Um, and then I would say that if I'm allowed three things, my final thing would be, or is really around the personal connection. That's what I love. So meeting people, we've got 6 networks and over 30 communities at EY, and being able to continuously learn from them, but also just from all of our people. I talk to people about all different things all of the time, and actually the impact that we're making is incredible, and we're being led by them. We're listening to what it is that they want and what they don't want, and that's where I get my energy.
Yeah. So when you talk about, you want to talk about to the people when you reach out to them. So what does that actually look like in practice? Is it a case of you hold kind of town hall meetings or surveys? What do you think has been the most effective tool to be able to get that interaction with your employees?
It's a combination. So what we've tried to do is access all of our people. So, as I said, we have got networks and communities, which allows us to then have those conversations on a more deeper, granular level. But we also know that this isn't the DE&I agenda is about everybody, and that includes majority groups. I think that's really important as well. So we work with our most senior leaders, and when they have an all people call for all people, so it's about business. So when they're sharing the financial updates, when they're sharing firm-wide updates and things that are most important for all of our people, we're on that agenda. And we're not speaking, we're working with our leaders, and they're actually giving the updates because it's their agenda and it's important for them to talk about. So that's one thing, is being able to do that and use that forum. And the other is through we have different functions or business units, service lines. We work closely with each of those teams and leaders, so we're able to kind of get in and understand if they're doing sessions on belonging, or they might be doing some sessions on inclusion, or they might be doing setting up a reverse race mentoring or a reverse or LGBT plus mentoring scheme. We're able to support them and advise, and then we get to hear what they're thinking, what they're feeling, what they want, what they don't. So that's the communication. I think it has to be top level, firm wide, to really try and get to everybody, but then start to go into the teams where that's where you're really going to get that engagement at that local level.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that sounds great. So, what's one thing do you think DEI leaders don't talk enough about, but they should?
I think I have seen actually more talking about this, but I haven't seen um, too much around like the actual energy that it takes to be in this space, and the resilience that you need, and actually the care that you need to give to yourself from a mental health and well-being perspective, because actually it's not an easy job. You've got that um, strategic focus. You're working with very senior leaders. You're really trying to think about what you can do. Things are changing all of the time externally from a social landscape. And also you're often hearing the stories and the lives of people that are going through things that are quite tough for them, and you take that on because you care, and people that are in this space, they absolutely care about what they're doing. So I think that's the piece that I think that I'd like to hear more people talking about. And then I also think from a more kind of actual DE&I skills perspective, it's that how do we start to really close the gap between you have to be right or you have to be wrong? I think sometimes people are afraid to have discussions because they don't know all of the answers, even from DE&I practitioners. They might know something about one particular area or be an expert, but they're not necessarily sure about others. But that's okay. We're all here to actually learn and continue to learn. And you can have an opinion and a point of view, but it doesn't invalidate somebody else's. I think that's important as well. You can have a point of view, but it doesn't mean that you supersede somebody else. To have actually constructive discussion so everybody learns. That's
Mm,
that's
yeah.
really helpful.
No, I think it's key, and I think it's key to creating an inclusive environment, workplace where people feel that they belong. Is that they don't feel like they're going to be they don't feel like it's they're not going to be respected for having a different opinion. I think it's important that we're creating a space, and even within the role that of DEI, is that I can have an opinion on how something should be done, but if you have a difference of opinion, that doesn't mean that your opinion is worse or
Yeah.
better or less
Mm-hmm.
than my own. It's
Yeah.
just a different way of thinking, and I think that breeds better results anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah, I totally agree. um to go back to your other point in terms of kind of the resilient it takes to be able to do this role, and from a mental health and well-being aspect, is there one thing in particular that you feel that you do to help you deal with um all of the kind of the work, the heavy load that you've got to carry with DEI?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I mean, one thing is, we've a really strong team ethic within our own central DE&I team. So um, we meet regularly and we make a point of not just talking about work, that actually we really get to know each other on a personal level. But also, if there's been a particular challenging conversation, or I've heard something that's been quite hard to digest, then I'll speak to one of my colleagues and share that with them, and just share how I feel. So that really helps in terms of that. And also, I have a counselor, and I think sometimes people there can be a taboo around that, but actually, I think everybody should have a counselor. It's really, really invaluable in actually being able to have somebody professional to just be there to listen to you, whether that's to do with work or home life, because we've all got lots of things going on at any one point of time. So for me, that's really invaluable actually, is having that space where I know that I can go and talk about anything that I want to.
Mm. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. I think it's really refreshing that as a leader of someone within your role, that you're open to sharing your ways of dealing, because we're all human at the end of the day, and we all have bad days and we all have to deal with a lot. Um and sometimes that gets a bit a lot to deal with all
Yeah,
on your own.
yeah,
And it's like how the saying goes, is it a problem shared is a problem halved?
yeah.
Like, so I think having a counselor can only be of a benefit. And
Mm,
I never understood why it is a taboo. Like, I
I
mean, I
know.
do, but I
Mm,
think this day and age now, I think we need more leaders like yourself to be open and transparent about how they're feeling and how
yeah,
they're dealing with that. Because it'll only help.
yeah. I think it's really important. I think, I've definitely not done that in the past, and it's been a real benefit to me actually in work and at home, because you're just, you're less stressed, and you know what, you learn a lot about yourself actually. It's, I think, any leader, and everybody really, if you want to grow and if you want to be the best leader that you can be for the people around you and for yourself, then you have to invest in yourself. You've got to put that time in, and actually you'll learn some things about yourself that will mean that you get better and stronger and are able to do more. So actually it's not a sign of weakness. I see it as a sign of strength and things that people should be proud of.
Yeah, 100%. Totally agree. So what's one thing a company should stop doing in order to be successful?
Well, I think one thing, I'll let you hold me to one thing, because otherwise I'll list off a few. But you know what? Stop trying to be perfect. You're not never going to have all of the data. You know, I understand that not all organizations have all of the data. But if you're, you don't have to have it by cut in every single way in terms of, characteristics. But actually, if you look around your organization and everybody looks like you, then you know that you've got work to do, right? And there's plenty of resources that are available externally that, are accessible, that you can download, things like from BICC and Catalyst and McKinsey, that you can help to bring you on this journey. So it isn't always about having the most money, it isn't always about having a perfect plan, but just get started. I think sometimes we just kind of think, oh, we'll just we'll plan this out and we'll do this next month and we'll come up with a 6 month, but just start, and then it will grow and your people will feel that, and don't be hesitant to think that you've got to have a perfect plan and you've got to already have shown what you've done before you go out to kind of start doing this work with your people. Actually, from what I've seen, people really react to leaders just actually putting a step forward and just moving forward with it. And the quicker you start, the quicker you're going to make progress and make a difference.
Yeah, I think sometimes you can probably plan and plan and plan. And so you've planned so much that actually you've forgotten what it is that you were
Yeah,
even the
yeah,
whole
yeah,
purpose of what you were planning in the first place.
yeah.
Sometimes it's just as simple as, I guess, picking up the phone or arranging to speak with some people, and then, as you said, just taking that step forward.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thanks so much, Joanne. I think I'm really glad that we had this conversation. We was able to share with our listeners today. You've given us some really, really good, useful tips and insights into your journey and to what EOI is up to. Before you leave us, could you share some parting piece of advice for the aspiring DEI leaders out there?
Yeah, I think connect with your, create a network for yourself. So often there are quite often I hear, there are standalone roles, and actually that can be quite lonely. So, use your LinkedIn network, or however it works for you, but just be connected. You don't have to know everything, but actually curiosity, um, and continuously learning, reading, listening to podcasts. That's how I found, actually, in the beginning, as I would listen to lots of podcasts and join webinars, and really just try and immerse myself in actually what's happening, who should I connect with, who can I learn from, and then you create a trust circle as well that you can connect with. um, and the other thing I would say is, often if there's a problem to solve, or somebody's come to you with a challenge, particularly if it's employees, and you don't have to have all of the solutions. Just listen and actually ask them, what do they want? What would make this better for you? What is there anything that I can do, or what can we do that is going to make your experience better? Because sometimes you can come up with this big thing that you need to do, but actually they just want this one thing that's really important to them. And if you can help them do that, then that's massive. So ask more questions and don't feel like you need to have all of the answers, I would say.
Great advice. Thanks so much, Joanne. And talking about connection, how can
Yes.
people connect with you?
Oh, I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter, so feel free to connect with me. And I try and share useful and practical things, and particularly from an EY perspective, I know that we're a large organization. We often have access to materials that we create that are available externally. So I try to share those so that other organizations and people can leverage them as well. So yeah, you'll find me there.
Oh, fantastic. Well, I'll definitely be putting a link down to your socials for anyone that's having a listen to the podcast so that they can click on your details and give you a follow. And I think some of those external information that you've got for EY would be really, really great and helpful to read. So thanks again, Joanne, and speak to you soon.
Thank you. All right, take care. Thank you.